Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today we're going to read some amazing and very current channelings from Quo. If you haven't heard before, Quo is a collection of higher density beings that channel through a group called LL Research that answer questions about spirituality and a variety of amazing topics. The information they provide is very resonating to me and has helped me on my spiritual path. It has expanded my understanding of the law of one, which is truly amazing. Channeled material from Carla Ruckert, Jim McCarty, and Don Elkins of LL Research in the 80s from an entity called Ra. Ra is also a part of this group that's being channeled with LL Research, and every time I learn something new, especially these more recent channelings, they are evolving and growing from previous channelings. This talks about a variety of topics, but in particular, the dynamic between responsibility and surrender, especially in relation to how we can serve others. First, we get a channeling delivered on April 28th, 2022. The question today, we'd like to discuss the tension between surrender and responsibility. We have realized that in some situations, we feel a great responsibility to act and try to serve in some capacity, but find ourselves unable to do so, or challenged to do so. And we know that sometimes some spiritual systems have encouraged us to surrender, and you have in the past encouraged us to simply love it and not try to fix it. So we would like to explore this tension between feeling responsibility and surrendering to the moment. Jim channeling says, "I am Quo, and I am with this instrument at this time. We greet each of you in the love and light and are once again honored to be able to join your group this evening and respond to the most salient query which you have asked for us this evening. Before we begin, we ask you that perpetual favor that you utilize the words and thoughts that we give you that you feel are important to you at this time, and for those that do not speak to your heart, that you leave those behind. We appreciate this gift of your discrimination. It allows us a wider range of response to your query. Tonight, you ask a question which each conscious seeker of truth must consider seriously in the life path of its own incarnation and the spiritualization of one's consciousness. For the world in which you now live and breathe and call the third density is that place wherein there is a cacophony of experience moving rapidly in all directions within your illusion, as points of view are put forth in one way and another, and in many more ways than can be comprehended by any conscious seeker of truth. It is such a mixture of division, of love, of hate, of separation, of confusion, that we have the greatest of sympathy for each of you as you attempt to make your way through this forest of trees that makes it so difficult to comprehend the overview, which is the foundation of your third density experience. As conscious seekers of truth, you look upon this world with a desire and even, as you say, a seeming responsibility to make sense of it in order to create a world in which your fellow seekers of truth, your other selves, which are all around the globe, may feel at home, may be able to perceive unity, may be able to be of service to each other, may see the Creator in all. How can you do this when there is so much that is incomprehensible, out of your reach, beyond all possibility of change from any direction, that the chaos of conscious confusion is infecting the entire population of the earth? So it would seem that the conscious seeker of truth who wishes to be of service to others will find itself somewhat bollocksed, shall we say, and unable to chart a course of service in such circumstances, and may find that the greater overview of such a situation is that of what you have called the acceptance, the ability to transform your own perceptions of what you see in the world around you, and indeed in many cases in the world within you. The service that you may offer in such a situation is, as you have surmised in your conversation before this session began, most helpful when it is one which accepts the unacceptable, which loves the unlovable, which serves the seemingly unservable. This is your connection to the one infinite creator within you and within all of the creation, and within each entity upon this planetary surface, that heart of love that you may open unconditionally, so that the love that created this great universe of beingness is also that love which you allow to flow as a river of infinite love through you to all you perceive. You see each entity in your daily rounds of experience as being seemingly separate from yourself, with ideas and opinions that are obviously different than yours. You look upon these ideas, entities, and opinions and see the Creator knowing itself in a manner which is unique to each entity within the creation. This knowing of the self is the great foundation principle upon which all of the creation and each entity within the creation is formed. It is the means by which the creation is a vibrant, protean entity that may find itself in all other selves. This is the great journey of seeking, to seek within the love of the one that is in all. This is your challenge. This is your joy. This is your journey. At this time, we shall transfer this contact to the one known as Kathy. We are those of Quo. We are those of Quo, and we are with this instrument, and we understand the query, and we may speak to the specific wording of part of the query in order to elucidate the concepts within the words. In these times on your planet, times which require much perception, thought, and decision, and perhaps action, reflection, and then more perception, quite possibly at a greater pace and into deeper context than many that are used to doing at this time, because it is a time of change that is great in magnitude and also change at perhaps a more rapid speed than many have experienced. So we will speak to the ideas of surrender and responsibility, for they seem to form a kind of continuum between them, with surrender having a connotation of passivity, acceptance, flowing with outer change, while responsibility at the other end of a continuum from the state of surrender could have the connotation of decision and action carrying forth and forward into time newness of being, newness of understanding, newness of foundation of life. And we wish to point out that there are points between these concepts upon the continuum that have validity as well, for there is the timing to these states of being. There is a timing to action, a timing to remaining passive, for example, when it is right to do each of these, producing the highest and best result to remain still, for example, in a state of surrender, letting events flow, and perhaps knowing from within that the time to act, the time to take responsibility, to help change happen in a productive or positive way is not yet, but may come later. So therefore, the defining characteristic of these states of being would be awareness. Awareness of what is right for the moment of time in which one would surrender can also simply mean not resisting. It can also mean an active decision to flow with energy or events with change. It can seem to be a state of inaction, but it also can be a state of decision to flow, which is an action in itself. Likewise, responsibility can be seen as action taking on one's shoulders the need to do something in order to produce an expected result. Responsibility can come in another form, perhaps seeing more passively as simply holding space, one that takes the responsibility of holding space in wait of something important to happen or to come that is not yet. And again, the important state of being is awareness, awareness of which of these is thought to be the best choice in order to produce the highest and best expected result. So we would say that when considering these states of being, perhaps along a continuum from surrender to responsibility, in terms of the choices that one may make in response to events in one's own individual life, as well as events on the greater scale of human life today, that the important starting point would be within self, the awareness to the highest degree possible of what is the best for anyone and given individual to do that may be somewhere along the continuum. And when perceived in this way, there's no right or wrong answer as to which is best, surrender or responsibility, or somewhere in between, or in any of the connotations previously mentioned. It is the awareness of what is right for each individual or set of individuals at a given moment in time and according to their perception or to his or her perception of surrender or responsibility. The meaning of those as it's specifically applied to this situation, one can only know this from within oneself, but then if that awareness is attained from within, the steps, the perceptions, the decisions will always be the right ones for that individual. It is indeed a matter of knowing oneself. We are aware of the great difficulty of knowing oneself clearly in such times as you are experiencing upon your planet, but we see clearly the light and love of which each individual is made, the light and the love emitting from each self and other self, the great possibility of the space and this continuum filling up with the love and the light, helping to eliminate one's own perceptions, one's own decisions, one's own actions. Know that you are and you live in this state of being which is light and love at all times, times of surrender, times of responsibility. We understand that within your illusion of third density, particularly upon your planet at this time, the process of coming to know oneself in such a deep and intimate way so as to understand the nature of one's responsibility and one's ability to surrender may seem an incredibly difficult and complicated task. And indeed, as we witness the hurricane of complex influences upon each individual within your illusion, we ourselves are baffled and find great admiration for each seeker who may even find within themselves the attempt to come to know themselves in this way. But it is of the utmost importance that this attempt is made when addressing this query between one's responsibility and surrendering to any moment. The term and idea of responsibility carries much what this instrument would call cultural baggage, and so the process of coming to know oneself in this context involves a process of examining one's upbringing, one's confluence of influences that have impressed upon the seeker from an early age, how one must act in any given situation, how one is to behave towards others, how one sees oneself in relationship to others. These are all very complicated influences that take fortitude and willpower to examine within the self as one experiences the day-to-day catalyst. But as we apply this process to understanding the concept of one's personal responsibility in any given moment, we find that slowly the seeker who has endeavored upon this journey will begin to shed notions of oneself, what one must do, and what one is obligated to do in any scenario. We find also that there are influences upon what may be called in some contexts the ego, and that when one feels a pull of responsibility, it might come from a desire to establish oneself as being responsible, to be seen as addressing a situation or a circumstance to carry a certain mantle on display for other selves. The process of introspection that allows one to know oneself and to come into a more meaningful and intimate relationship with the concept of responsibility will necessarily involve shedding oneself of many of these notions. We do not mean to ask the seeker to dismiss the notion of responsibility completely, for as one sheds these notions, one will find that this call of responsibility indeed comes from the heart, that the impetus, the impulse to reach out and influence a situation, to bring about more love, more peace, more comfort, to help and to aid is such a natural impulse for the positive seeker that it becomes ingrained even amidst so much cultural baggage within the seeker that this cultural baggage simply becomes a heavier burden or distorting influence than is necessary. And this is the context from which our encouragement to not endeavor to fix it, but to love it comes from. This is the context where surrender may become an applicable notion for the spiritual seeker, for there are so many influences upon the self that the expectations become a hindrance rather than an aid, and instead of motivating oneself, they become a burden that is counterproductive to the desire of the seeker to be of service. This dynamic between accepting responsibility and accepting surrender may play out, as we have said, on a certain spectrum, and to move too far in any certain direction can create this counterproductivity for some seekers. We find that the notion that one simply must love without any responsibility towards one's environment may become a sort of comfort blanket, as this instrument might put it, an excuse to avoid acting in situations where one feels called to act. But there is discomfort involved. Sometimes serving others from the heart may indeed push one to act when they otherwise would not, to speak, when they otherwise would not, to accept an uncomfortable situation so that the love of the Creator can shine where it otherwise might not. We do not wish to encourage seekers to avoid discomfort and to avoid acting upon responsibility when they feel called to do so. On the other end of the spectrum, we find that there may be those who feel such great responsibility and such a strong impulse to act that their efforts become nearly futile, for they end up, as you may say, spinning their wheels without genuine progress. Their intense desire to achieve a certain outcome baffles their ability to genuinely bring about such an outcome. And despite much effort seen upon the surface, little is done and achieved upon the unseen metaphysical realms, either for the seeker or for those the seeker desires to serve. We find these two dynamics and many dynamics between these two spectrums to play out among many seekers upon the positive path. To come to know oneself and know one's true responsibility in any moment requires one to examine the self and the tension one feels between these two notions, to dive deeply into this feeling of tension, to take into meditation the strong desire to be of service and to shine love within your realm, and to allow this tension to break apart within one, to open one up to, in a sense, allow one to dismiss and perhaps even find death and rebirth from the former attachment to responsibility, and to allow oneself to be born again into a new understanding of how to relate to any given situation in which one feels called to responsibility. The seeker upon the positive path who succeeds in this balance of surrendering and accepting responsibility may walk within this tension with confidence, knowing that in any given moment, one may be called to simply share their love and shine their light quietly or gently with a soft hand, or one may find that there is indeed action that one may take and a goal towards which the seeker can strive. Yet this confidence may manifest as faith within the seeker that the effort made towards this goal, the effort made to shine the love and the light of the Creator, however it is called forth in the moment, may not appear to have great effect in the seen realm upon the surface of the illusion of your third density, but that is worth the effort all the same, that there is much work being done despite little evidence of that work finding success to the veiled perception. The complicated influences upon your planet cause this notion of coming here with a purpose and with a mission to instill upon the wanderer a much greater burden than one may typically anticipate from outside of the incarnation. These words were spoken with the intent to allow the wanderer to release expectation that they must achieve a certain goal, that they must find results as they seek to achieve their mission. For if such expectation is placed upon the self, there is much distortion and even harm that may be done that will necessitate further healing for the wanderer and for the self. As we have spoken, the wanderer has come here not to fix, but to love. We do not mean to imply that whatever circumstance or situation or entity is to be loved must be loved from a distance and passively. To love something requires an intimate knowledge and perception of it and a relationship to it. This might be done quietly from a distance, but in many scenarios, in order for a positive entity, particularly a wanderer, to love any given circumstance in which one finds the necessity to offer the Creator's love and light, one must engage with that thing. And in many cases, this does not require the wanderer to take action in order to serve. To find the balance and to walk this balanced path of confidence will mean that the answer of how this may unfold for each individual and each situation will be manifested from the heart. And for the seeker wishing to manifest their highest service, a deepening relationship with one's own heart and intuition is absolutely necessary. For it is through these realms that the love and the light of the one infinite Creator will flow through the entity and inform the entity's actions in any situation. This is a difficult and noble task, and we offer our deepest admiration and appreciation for any seeker upon your planet who strives to do so at this time. We then move to a channeling delivered on April 20th, 2022. We would like to examine the nature of free will in relationship to the channeling process. For years, the Confederation almost always offers a disclaimer before each channeling, asking the reader or listener to use their discernment in accepting those concepts that resonate and discard what does not. They claim that this allows them to speak more freely in offering guidance. Can you elaborate on the Confederation's approach to free will in channeling? What is the philosophical basis for the approach? What is the relationship between the source, instruments, and reader? When a reader trusts the process and the source, and why can they discard certain information? We are Quo, and we greet this circle in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We are, as always, joyed and excited to join you in your circle of seeking. The desire to serve as channels for the Confederation and to offer yourselves as instruments when joined together in this circle forms a sort of beacon. This beacon can be seen in the time-space realm by us and others who resonate with this desire within your hearts to serve. And we are called to the circle along with others who wish to aid you in your task. It is this shared desire that allows our hearts to join with yours. And it is in this desire that we find within your group a certain stabilizing and potentiating energy that allows this circle to serve in this capacity, despite what we see as somewhat drained or erratic energies brought upon by the needs and demands of your third density existence. We offer this observation in commiseration for, in our perspective, it is quite common within your density upon your planet that any who wishes to serve in this capacity must do so within the context of a difficult and demanding existence where the day-to-day life leaves little room for sincere introspection and seeking and serving from those places. This desire within your hearts helps to manifest the necessary energy and stability in order to perform this service. And with each iteration of this circle, that desire and will is reinforced so that the energizing nature of this joining may increase as we find that the demands upon your third density plane also increase. Rejoice in this desire. We encourage you as a circle to communicate this desire and to share this desire amongst each other and find comfort within it, for it is necessary within your third density existence. This is the context in which you serve, and context is an important factor in addressing the query that you have posed this afternoon. We somewhat ironically offer our typical request and disclaimer in asking that all those who may perceive our words use their minds and their hearts to discern the value of our words upon their own path. In doing so, we are given more freedom of expression through instruments such as this to share in a deeper sense, knowing that we have reduced the chances of serving as a stumbling block for the seeker if they feel free to dismiss that which we offer. Offering this disclaimer and making this request changes the context of our relationship with the instrument and the reader or listener. It instills a certain mindset within those who see value in our words, and we hope and encourage them to place their own faculties first and use our service and the service of this circle as supplementary to their own sovereign path. When those who perceive our words accept this disclaimer and permit our request with sincerity, it further changes the context of the relationship, for knowing that the words spoken through instruments such as this may be waived by the sovereign seeker instead of accepted without question allows us to rest in the fact that our words are serving as catalyst for the seeker, not as instruction or prescription. It is our desire to offer catalyst and not instruction, for there is little growth or understanding that comes from accepting instruction without question. Yet when words of guidance such as ours are evaluated and sat with and placed in the heart to be compared to one's own ideals and one's own path, they may become transformative, not because of their accuracy necessarily, but because they have allowed the seeker to learn more of the self and the nature of the self as the creator, and to the nature of the creation about one as inseparable from self and creator. This is the primary reason for the disclaimer that we offer, and this is the foundation to our approach to honoring free will as we interact with planets such as yours. The foundation comes from a desire not to string planets along necessarily to adopt them into our view of the universe, but to support them in discovering their own view of the universe. This may be done by sharing what we have discovered upon our path, but we do not believe or wish to convey that our own view of the universe is the only view. The Creator has many facets and aspects that may be discovered by each social complex and by each individual upon their own paths. To limit one's discovery of the universe to those words that we share with you would be to limit the Creator itself. This is not only undesirable for us, but indeed it is impossible. In an attempt to place such limitations upon the seeking of other selves, we have discovered that this creates further distortion and necessitates restitution and restoration on the part of the entity or entities that were influenced in this way. As we have shared with you in previous sessions, the relationship of the Confederation with your planet is one that has evolved and has changed based upon the context of your own social complexes, your own cultural movements, and our own learning done through this interaction. You will notice that long in what you call the past, we, the Confederation, had been much more open in our willingness to interact with those upon your planet. We have appreciated the freedom to appear in more literal and physical ways to those upon your planet, and also find other methods or modes of interaction that span beyond the more subtle communication that we do through the work of dreams, through subtle visions, and through services such as this channeling circle. The question that may arise from this observation in light of the query that you have posed for the circle may be, why have we landed on a more withdrawn approach to interacting with your planet? This is also central to the question of free will in the context of our relationship with you. We have found ourselves put into undesirable positions when interacting in more direct ways. We have found that our interaction has had undesired influence, and this is not due to the inaccuracy or falseness of any interaction that we have had with your planet. We've always done our best to communicate and share the love and the light of the Creator in the most undistorted way possible. The undesirable position that we found arising from our relationship with your planet has come from a misunderstanding on our part of the cultural context in which we have offered ourselves to you. When we have interacted with your planet in more direct ways, we have found that this influence has been a source of more confusion than enlightenment, that the catalyst offered by this interaction had less chance of offering positive transformational growth and instead increased distortions of a more negative or service to self nature because of our lack of understanding in how the particular light that we shared would be received. When examining how our disclaimer within these channeling sessions may be evaluated by the seeker, this is a key aspect that we wish to instill by making such a disclaimer. We may share ourselves as freely and openly as we can in the context of a circle such as this, yet we cannot know how our words will be received. We may intend to convey certain ideas in order to bring about certain contemplations or transformations within the listener or reader, yet those may be placed within the self in ways that we could not predict. And so when we ask the seeker to utilize their own discernment in evaluating our words, we are honoring the fact that within the third density, all truth is filtered through a personal lens fortified by the illusion and by the veil of forgetting. We cannot fully comprehend with specificity the nature of your beingness behind this veil. We may see many things that you do not see. We may read energies that are only perceivable to you on a subtler or intuitive or feeling level. And through this perception, we may offer insight that is unique or novel to you. Yet it would be improper in the eyes of the Creator for us to know every minute detail of how every interaction would unfold. We do not have omnipotence, and we cannot predict with a certainty how our words will be received. To reinforce this layer of disclaimer, we have limited our interactions with your planet significantly, and a primary means of communication has been found within channeling circles such as this. or in offering our service in this way, there are several benefits that help to reinforce the desire to honor the free will of your peoples. One benefit is that when channeling with a group such as this, there is the interaction between the instrument and us, the source, in a way that allows us to be filtered through a cultural understanding held by the instruments and the group. We benefit from the perception of the instruments of the world, in that it informs the information that flows through each instrument and informs us of more creative ways to convey information with accuracy as we grow in relationship with instruments such as you. Another benefit to honoring free will that comes from limiting our interactions to methods such as this comes from the aspect of what might be called plausible deniability. For our words are being spoken by a human mouth and cannot be proven using your methods of research in the material realm and science. And thus those who perceive our words and accept the reality or possibility that they are real must do so based on a certain faith, not in the instruments or in the source, that is, us, the confederation of planets in service to the one infinite creator, but instead in the value of the words themselves. And the process cannot be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. More emphasis must be placed upon the value found within the communication and the effects of that communication in the life of the seeker. This places the impetus for belief onto the sovereign seeker, who may at any moment decide that this process that is unfolding, where the source of this information is invisible and spoken through human instruments, may be dismissed, for it is just one among many sources of information that speak to these spiritual truths. If we came to your planet in our own form and displayed our technologies and our beingness in full view, it would be impossible for most upon your planet to deny that the information we share with you comes from a place of higher understanding, and thus it would be accepted without question. When instruments such as yourself offer themselves to serve as a filter, it removes this possibility, so that the distortions that we have found ourselves affecting on your planet in the past may be reduced. We encourage this circle and those who perceive our words to further contemplate the effect of sharing information that is transformative and accepting information without question based on trust in a process rather than the value of the information itself. Within the complicated energetic dynamics of third density, it is impossible to know the influence of one's actions. And in the position that you within the circle have found yourselves, it is vastly important to constantly evaluate the impact of your service as it is perceived by more and more people, to examine the energetic nature of your relationship amongst each other and those who you share this information with. We encourage you to follow your hearts, to listen to the guiding voice within you that constantly points towards your desire to serve in an undistorted and clear sense, while also reflecting constantly on the service that you perform and the nature of its influence within your realm of service. We recognize that your experience is not, by most relative measures, an easy one in any sense. This instrument receives us from a state of feeling rather depleted himself due to the rigors of your world, and we might gently suggest the fastidious guarding of the energies in the lead up to these sessions if one wishes to serve from a more optimal state, shall we say. Nevertheless, you as instruments need not be perfect. You need not be Olympic athletes, shall we say, for first and foremost, it is the strength and purity and the totality of your desire to serve that offers us a grounding station with which to connect our energies and transmit our messages through this circle and the home circle and others with whom we work. Your desire to serve arises from that level of beingness which is not often evident to your conscious senses, that level wherein you are radiant with light moving into that space that is beyond name and form, where you are less identified with the outer masks that you hold on to so tightly and instead rest as one in the wholeness of all things and the peace that prevails there. Trust in this place within yourself and relax the tensions, the doubts, and the worries, for this is not a graded experience, nor is there one best way to serve as a vocal channel. As your own recollection of our now many years of speaking through this group understands, there are a virtually infinite number of ways to creatively point complex minds with complex concerns toward the simple unity of all things. Each of the myriad facets of your world, of which each succeeding year and generation brings yet more and more for you to navigate, serves as a touchstone for us to orient the attention toward the fundamental eternal principles of spiritual evolution that are present and relevant and needed in your experience now, as they are on every plane, however uniquely interpreted and accessed they may be upon each plane or level of awareness. The more distortion that any given society generates in its thoughts, its relationships, and its conceptions of who it is and how things operate just gives us more platform, we shall say, to springboard from. To share our emotions, we correct this instrument message. For however thick and opaque and tangled the distortion which may in seemingly drifting from the unity of all things and blocking the vision of the self from the Creator, nonetheless distortion arises ultimately as a non-dual facet of the One, such that no distortion can, in a literal or true or actual sense, separate the self from the Creator, but can instead only create the illusion of separation from the Creator. To speak more directly now to your area of focus for this circle regarding that well-worn disclaimer with which we preface our messages, and its implication for the dynamics of free will at play, we have spoken to considerable length on this point, and might ask you that you consider the nature of teach-learning and learn-teaching between any two entities. These reciprocal dynamics of teaching and learning can happen between any two, whether they are seemingly of equal evolution or at different, as you might conceive it, vertical stages in their evolution. Teaching may happen going both up and down, down and up, or across more lateral planes, even the young teaching the old and vice versa. When one considers the classical sense of the teacher and the student, whereby the teacher is presumed to have a greater depth and a breadth of knowledge, due presumably to their own experience and training and qualification, for such there is a seeming disparity in knowledge between the one who learn teaches and the one who teach learns, with the weight of that balance being upon the one who teach learns in being the dispenser of a knowledge and perspective. What is it that transpires between the two in this scenario? Does the teacher do the learning for the student by teaching them a subject, say, such as math, or in your case metaphysics and philosophy, and the using of catalyst for growth? If such a teacher attempts to learn for the student, the teacher has entered, perhaps innocently and inadvertently, into what can grow to be fairly significant imbalance and distortion, and there is then a short-circuiting or subversion of the student's free will and sacred duty to learn what is theirs to learn. The teacher, in attempting to do the learning for the student, may supplant the student's processes and attempt to impose that teacher's view of the world upon the student. The creation is not set up for entity A to do the learning for entity B. Each entity on any plane of existence is a learning, adapting, awareness, expanding, choice-making unit. The nature of the primal, as you call it, first distortion of free will is such that every iota of creation is endowed not only with this ability, but necessity, objective, and duty, or job, if you will, to discover itself as the creator through eons of evolution across the landscape of space and time and countless entities, environments, and situations. Were one entity capable of doing the learning for others, the creation would fall out of balance and be inoperable in ways that we cannot quite convey through this instrument. So it is that each must take in the information received in the environment of the self, into the self, and decide upon its own how to weigh and evaluate, sift and sort and distill this information for the self so that it may choose its choices accordingly and furnish itself with experience that it alone may place the next step in front of the other upon the long journey. Our disclaimer helps to ensure and safeguard this balance. Our disclaimer does not dictate to the receiving entity to what exact use they are to put to our words, but rather it is a reminder to the self to refer to and exercise their own discernment within. It is not our wish that any entity would become reliant upon us. Our joy rather increases in witnessing the third density entity grow in its own power to grasp the love that is inherent in any given moment in which the entity opens its awareness and surrenders its intellect and present moment distracting patterns. Our joy grows as the entity discovers within itself that which neither we nor any source can teach. that being the creator indwelling within the heart of the being. This is the self's inalienable connection, closer to the self, much closer to the self than its own thoughts, its own memories, its body, and its breath. No words or display of information in the universe can teach the entity its own creatorhood. Words and perspective may certainly inspire the seeking that leads, eventually, to surrender. It may offer catalyst, which catalyzes the other self upon this journey, but we cannot teach the entity what it already is and always has been. It is for the entity, instead, to, through the disciplines of the personality, remove the camouflage that obscures the conscious awareness from abiding in what the self already is. The self which is doing the seeking and using the catalyst in order to find what it is paradoxically seeking while not knowing that the awareness behind the seeking is already it. It is the parable of the policeman chasing the arsonist when the policeman is the arsonist. There is no way to manufacture into being or achieve or gain creatorhood per se, because the self already is the creator. It is, as this instrument understands it, akin to one gaining their feet when the feet are already there. To assume that we, through our service, could do this so-called learning for the self would be gross imbalance and distortion on our parts. So instead, in respect to the sovereignty of the entity upon their own path, we remind them that our words are but a resource for their consideration, one among a variety of other resources. Everything is potentially a resource for the entity. Indeed, the entire creation is offering itself as support for the entity's upward evolution, both in pleasure and in pain. Each thing, when seen from the higher perspective, is a catalyst for the entity's growth. We are happy to share our resource in the reciprocation of teaching learning and learning teaching. In so doing, we learn about ourselves each time we offer our message. It is a manner of sharing a project, shall we say, with you in third density. It is a way of sharing the work in the celebration of the great honor and privilege to be alive upon any plane, to have the great and unique wonder of traversing an illusion as a seeming separate entity, in order that we may re-experience the infinity which we have been all along, and thus enhance that joy that is inherent in our beings, in all of our beings. Moreover, we would add that the disclaimer helps to create an environment which lends itself to the open exploration that is necessary for the spiritual journey and safeguards against that which deadens the self to the necessary open exploration. That conception which you know as fundamentalism, which is that mindset that takes an external source to be infallible and often literal as a strict code of life to be followed or adhered to, that creates categories of a worthy and unworthy people, whose edges are lined with fear that speaks to the negative consequences of disobeying the message. This is not the way of the positive polarity as we understand it. Far more empowered is the seeker if they may evaluate that which comes to them, including our own message, without coercion or pressure or any sort of persuasion that might limit or short-circuit their sovereign and free processes. Our attitude not only helps to guard against these energies in supporting the independence or non-dependence of the seeker receiving our words, but it also helps to make room for the inevitable and invariable filtering distortions that will be introduced due to the nature of conscious channeling through human instruments. The modality of channeling is one which is necessarily colored, which is to say, in a very non-pejorative sense, distorted by the human instrument. There is a blending of our seed concepts and principles and ideas with the instrument's own awareness and knowledge and facility with language and limitations. We do not speak to you purely as 100% ourselves, shall we say. We do not mean to convey that our message is misconstrued in any way, or by passing through a human instrument is misleading. Else we wouldn't invest ourselves in this practice. It is just to say that when placing our consciously channeled message upon your plate through awake and aware human instruments, it would be well perhaps to add another grain of salt or two to your meal, as your peoples might express it, for as we are loath that any seeker would depend on any particular syllable in our message, as if understanding of the Creator depended upon it, even more so those serving as human instruments in this and other circles wish to protect the free will of the seeker. Ultimately, of course, we cannot engineer how anything will be received or what choices the seeker will make. Thus, we attempt to share a viewpoint that repeatedly underscores the primacy of free will in the operation of all things. It is a good and healthy reminder. We begin our messages with this disclaimer, and we will continue to do so as long as we continue this service through this group known to you as LL Research. We sincerely appreciate the opportunity to exercise and collaborate, if you will, with the entities of this circle. The dedication to service to others through this avenue of communication is seen and appreciated, held with much love and light by those of the Confederation. Additionally, there is a deep sense of gratitude for this group's desire to further understand and refine the channeling process, especially in regards to discovering and envisioning the methods and protocols utilized while honoring the free will of all involved, be that the Confederation voice, the instrument, or the seeker who may discover the words of this session and every session. This instrument is feeling rather fatigued and is struggling with a less than rested or prepared physical vehicle at this time. However, we shall attempt to speak a few final thoughts through her prior to transferring our contact onward. This instrument in particular feels that a wealth of information to digest has already been allowed to pass through the two previous instruments and questions whether she can build upon or add to that information. Hence, we will perhaps speak of one final aspect of this channeling process, and that being the unique configurations of every entity and aspect of this illusion, and how that might color, if you will, the transfer and reception of what information moves through the instrument. Each entity acting as instrument is an extension of the Creator, but so configured in a way on this side of the veil, so to speak, so as to be infinitely unique with notches and shapes and hues, so as to create a one-of-a-kind sculpture manifestation of the Creator and its creation. Imagine this unique extension as a pipe within a series of pipes. Those of us who speak through the instruments are similarly a pipe. From the source, the information moves through us, and this movement is through our highly unique and individualized channel or pipe, then moving through the again highly individualized and unique pipe of the instrument, and then the seeker who attempts to read or listen and or receive that information is yet another highly individualized and unique pipe. There will be information that has changed or allowed to divert elsewhere within the journey from source to final destination. That is to say that the recipient's ability to discern and allow some information to fall away may also be due to that entity's current configuration, its subconscious or unconscious desire to omit some stimuli and accept other, its perhaps unintentional actions of hyperfocus and distraction, and finally, its ability or availability to what you may call make sense of that information which it receives. See this as multiple planes of the stained glass, the light refracting and imbuing with different colors and obstacles as it moves from source to the part of the entity receiving said light. This is not to say that the information that is lost or discarded by the seeker is an act of what you may call defiance or distancing. Instead, it could be viewed as the manifestation of a seeker coming to and interpreting the information from the foundation and place along the journey that the recipient currently finds itself. As has been stated before, the information received is not to be viewed as instruction, rather an opportunity for growth and expansion, a catalyst for the seeker to move along its path of seeking. Therefore, our conditional clause, if you will, that we begin each session with is simply a friendly reminder that the seeker will receive that which the seeker needs, that the seeker trust in its ability to discern and intuit, that the seeker stay grounded within the knowledge that all is an extension of the Creator, and that the seeker find peace as it navigates this sometimes confusing and complicated illusion. This instrument, fearing that she has manifested some strange and colorful information in her exercising of the channeling process at this time, is asking that we depart from her and transfer our contact to the one known as Austin. Therefore, we shall take our leave of her at this time, and we thank this instrument for her attempt, and ask that we shall allow for some grace to enter her heart when she allows us to move onward. Without further ado, we shall take our leave and transfer to the one known as Austin. We are Quo, and we are again with this instrument. We offer our gratitude to this circle for each instrument in exercising their highest fidelity in attempting to serve as instruments and transmit the thoughts and concepts that we offer through you to your planet. The topic chosen for this session is one that is of high importance to us, and having the opportunity to speak to the dynamics of how our words may be received and evaluated and what we view as the appropriate relationship between us and your planet has allowed us to further instill these concepts in this group and in this contact. so that we may sturdy the platform of this service in future sessions. We find great comfort and companionship within the hearts of each within this circle, and within each who perceives our words and opens themselves to the light that we wish to share, so that they may return that light to us and to your planet. This is a grand service for us, and we cannot emphasize how grateful we are to have this opportunity to interact in this way. We will now leave this circle as we found it, in the light and in the love of the one infinite Creator. We are Quo, Adonai, Adonai Vasu Boragas. These are two very interesting channelings, very recent, and I found that we can take a lot from it. The reason the first channeling was so interesting is it's being asked in the context of terrible things happening in the world. We turn on the news, there's shootings that are happening, there's war, and we don't know what to do. I feel helpless. How can I offer my service to the people that are suffering? And sometimes you have to let go, and you have to send love to raise the vibration of it, and you have to surrender. You may feel a responsibility in many cases, and the more power that we gain, we also within us feel a greater responsibility to fix the world because we have this power. As you learn to create your reality and control the events of your life to some extent, you then think, perhaps I can help use what I've learned to help others across the world. Maybe you will be given opportunities to serve. Things are going to come up, and in those cases, take it. Sometimes patience is a virtue, and in the meantime, we can send love, and as Paul Selig explained, we can view it from a loving perspective and raise the vibration of all that we see. I found the second part super interesting. We get some behind-the-scenes understanding of Quo and the Confederation in particular, and how they channel and why they don't land on our planet and show us their technology and their equipment, because they've done that in the past. They did that. They built the pyramids. But when they did, they ended up favoring elites over certain groups, and it had disastrous consequences, and they've had to come back and fix all the mistakes that they made. So they've learned when they stand in authority, people stop learning. When they say, well, they know everything that we need to know, so I'm not going to continue looking other places. I'm not going to read that text over there or that one because Quo says they know everything, so I'm just going to listen to them. That's a mistake. We don't want to make that mistake. And so they are teaching something very important, and that is your own resonance. Learning to evaluate all the information that comes in for yourself. Don't let anybody else tell you this is good or this is bad. You got to evaluate it for yourself. And as you learn to evaluate information, you learn the way your body reacts to it, the way your mind reacts to it, and you can filter information. Sometimes I see stuff in the spiritual community, I immediately know that that's BS, and I stop listening to it. I move on from it. But it's a personal thing. I try not to advertise it. Sometimes I do when it is my responsibility, if it's in my group or something. But very few times I have done that, because everybody is just choosing for themselves along this path. That's what my podcast is. I'm teaching to learn. As they talk about here, there's a difference between teaching and learning, and in many cases, you learn more when you teach. And so a lot of these topics, I'm learning a lot by trying to teach about it. I'm also learning a lot about spirituality by reading things like this. And so there is a process of teach learning that's involved in this path of service. And it's for all of us to learn how we accept information and how we give information and the effect of our words. Because what's going to happen is you're going to reach a level of high, elevated, enlightened light. And you're going to have a certain power. And it happened to these entities. They're much closer to the Creator with greater access to technologies and information on a higher density, and they blew it. They messed up. They came in thinking that they could be of service, and they hurt the society because of the relationships of domination that created in the upper leadership caste, in particular for this one example. But it could happen with any of us. We could think that our words are powerful, but we might say something that is incredibly damaging when somebody misinterprets or misunderstands. It happens all the time. Words are not perfect, they're fallible. And so it's important for all of us to take on this mantle that Quo is teaching here. Take what information comes to you and evaluate it within yourself, because you are independent in all of creation on your journey, and you are choosing what resonates with you and what doesn't. It's been a real joy covering this material, and there's so much more. I recommend you check out LL Research, and they always have new channelings coming out, and there's all kinds of old channelings you can check out. It's an amazing service and website. They're an amazing group, and they've done so much, and it's awesome to read these words. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution, as well as all the Quo episodes, at therealityrevolution.com. You can also look at the playlists for the channel and look at the Quo playlist if you want to listen to more Quo material. I am sending love and light to everyone that can hear my words. Through the sound stream, through the light, through whatever is coming up in your environment, I want you to feel it. This love and light is surrounding you and blessing you and changing you, and now go and spread it to everyone else. Welcome to the Reality Revolution.